everybody, it's Josh Runquist here for Heavy Debriefings, and it's time to talk about my top 10 albums of 2012. A huge part of my life happened here. I finally moved away from home in 2012. I started discovering who I was in 2012, and life started to get a little bit better for me in 2012. And you wouldn't normally think that by listening to all the depressing music that's actually on this top 10 list, but it was a damn fine year for music. Let's get right into it with number 10. Coming in at number 10 is Periphery with P2. This time, it's personal. And I feel like this is the perfect Periphery album. It was right off the trails of the debut album, which was mainly written by Misha, but this album had the whole band writing the album, and you can really tell that. It had all the ambition in the world, they knew what they wanted to do. Some songs are connected, some songs just fit perfectly together. It had amazing guest soloists on this album. Everyone in the band just really knew what they were doing here. And in 2012, things were kicking off for them in such a great way. In fact, this might even be peak Periphery in terms of popularity, and for good reasoning. I mean, whether you got something as heavy as Ragnarok or The Gods Might Be Crazy, you have something as light and fluffy as Scarlet, which happens to be one of my favorite songs that they've done. Starting off the album proper, well, with the first real song, Have a Blast, with blast beats. Haha, hee hee. But no, like, when it comes to progressive metalcore, I think Periphery did an amazing job back in 2012, which they never really topped, which of course I talked about in my Backwards Marathon series. But this is probably the album worth checking out if you ever want to see what Periphery is all about. Coming in at number 9 is Nathrak with Veritas. And this is the first album that really truly grabbed me from the band. I discovered the band on the previous album, Passion, and it was starting to get there, but it was just a little too much for me. But then Veritas just came in with what exactly I was looking for in this style, and you can arguably say they pretty much kept this style all the way up to now, and I'm okay with that. It is basically the soundtrack to the apocalypse. All of the verses sound absolutely extreme in its style of industrial and black metal, noise, and grindcore, but the choruses are so extremely epic sounding, close to, I even dare say, like a power metal kind of sound in the choruses, with just the extreme power of what the clean vocals are doing, and just making everything feel, for a lack of a better term, epic. And it's a winning formula. The band even saw that, and they continue that on up to this day, and I hope they continue it with or without Mick, depending on how things go. But this is the first album that I feel really truly captured what they were going for, and I loved every album since, but this album in particular just really nailed it, particularly the song Forging Towards the Sunset. Still one of my favorite Nathrak songs, and you should check it out yourself if you dare. Coming in at number 8 is Ishan with Eremita, and this album almost feels like it kind of takes place after the album After. Although they aren't the same album, it's not a sequel album, it's very similar musically, not really conceptually, but if you enjoyed what they did on After, Eremita is a bit more streamlined than that. It's still very progressive, it still has a lot of great black metal moments behind it, super proggy, but they do have a lot of connections musically that goes on. Also, you have some great vocal performances like the singer of Leprous, of course there's a connection to Ishan there. Jurgen of Shining does some amazing sax solos on this one once again, and of course Devin Townsend lends his vocals onto the song Introspection. This song and album in general really deals with a lot of mental health struggles in the human psyche, and it's a great representation of where Ishan was at the time. Of course, after this is where it started to really start to get experimental, be it more cock rock or German expressionism, but here, it's one of the most forward Ishan albums, which is so strange because it is still proggy and out there. But if you need an album to get into Ishan with, this is probably the one. Coming in at number 7 is the self-titled debut from For the Imperium. And for those that are familiar with the band will know that this album originally came out in 2011, but that was just in Finland. The rest of the world got to check out this album in 2012, so I'm counting it that way. This album is absolutely insane. It can go from pop rock to near death metal, just like that. And it's got everything in between. It's got a lot of great progressive moments, alternative moments, experimental moments. It's got so many things that I was definitely looking for at the time, with absolutely insane vocals, extreme playing. The song Pike River is something that I can still play on the drums, which I haven't even played in several years, but I still air drum to it all the time and I can hit all the notes. I'm very proud of that. But this is a musician's album, and I love every bit of it. It is so catchy yet so complex at the same time. And if you're looking for something a bit left of center in your alternative and progressive metal listening, you should definitely check this one out. Coming in at number 6 is Atlascaris with Portal of Eye, their debut album, which took nearly a decade to write. And it's insane how that works out, but as someone who's been in nearly 15 bands without a single real album to his name, I totally understand why it took so long. But it was absolutely worth all of the pain and struggle, as this is one of the finest debut albums out there. I love everything about this, and yes, even if the band doesn't want to admit the Opeth vibes on this album, it is filled with Opeth vibes. But it also has a lot of other things going on for it as well too. It's got a great progressive, blackened death metal feel behind it, with the growls, of course, being death metal, the music having a lot of black metal flair to it, a lot of progressive moments, and of course what makes everything stand out is the incorporation of violin as a main instrument. You chalk this all together with songs that are pretty long for normal people out there. For me, they fit perfectly for what they need to do. But of course, I don't feel this is the best Atlascaris album. That will come later. But this one is fantastic and absolutely worth checking out, especially if you want something more on that extreme metal side that is also filled with absolute dark beauty. Coming in at number 5 is Enslaved with Ritter, and this might be my favorite Enslaved album from start to finish. This has everything that I love about the band. It's pure progressive black metal, still have the Viking metal tendencies going along with it, as obviously, of course, lyrically, but musically, this is where they definitively become the Pink Floyd of black metal. So many great songs on here that are worth your attention if you're looking for something heavier than Amon Amarth in your Viking metal. Enslaved just does things perfectly. And of course, it has my favorite Enslaved song on this album with Roots of the Mountain. I feel like this should have been used in the soundtrack to some kind of war movie of some kind. Like, you could have easily done it like in The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings. You could have done it in any kind of a mystical movie and it would feel appropriate. It's got such great epic flow behind it. I don't think any company would dare do it, but I want to see it happen. But yeah, if you like progressive metal, if you like black metal, if you like Viking metal, and you haven't checked out Enslaved, this probably should be the album that you check out first. Of course, there are albums that are much more streamlined, albums that are much more black metal, some albums that are much proggier. This is a great, well-rounded mix of everything. Coming in at number 4 is Paradise Lost with Tragic Idol. And as I keep going back and forth through all the Paradise Lost albums, not a single clunker in the bunch in my opinion, this might be my favorite Paradise Lost album. I think it really is from start to finish, as it has the most songs that mean the most to me. It has the most songs that I actually feel something in here. It just has everything that I'm looking for. It is the last album before the death growls come back into the band. Otherwise, this is one of the heaviest Paradise Lost albums if you don't include growls. And it's so great to see that you can show that gothic, doomy, heavy metal feel while still being true to yourself. And this is kind of the last album, like in retrospect, it feels like this had to be the last album of that style before they started doing something new, whether it was going back to the more industrial, alternative sound, whether it was going back into the death doom sound, which is what they did. This was an album of change, but it was a great album to have that change go on with. And I got to see them during this tour. I think it was the last time Paradise Lost came to the US for a full tour, and yeah, they only played about a half hour, opening for Catatonia and Devin Townsend, also including Stolen Babies, but it was a fantastic tour and a hell of a show, and I need to see Paradise Lost again. This album reminded me of that, and If you want a good sense of like the heavy side of Paradise Lost without getting into Death Doom, this is an album for you. Coming in at number 3 is the Devin Townsend Project with Epic Cloud. And sadly, this is probably the last album that Devin Townsend's going to appear in this series. But it's a great one to go out on. It's progressive pop metal. It's very, very epic for a lack of a better term. And if you loved what Devin Townsend did with Addicted, if you liked what he did with Ocean Machine, this is an album for you. It is super poppy, super catchy, and might be his best regarded solo album. I think it is, because it really is that kind of album where no matter how heavy you love stuff, no matter how light you like stuff, there's something you'll be able to appreciate about this album. Some of my favorite songs on here aren't even the heavy songs, like Save Our Now. Again, feels like a superhero theme to me. Like I kind of mentioned with Enslaved, where I felt like that should have been in a movie where there's a big epic battle going on. Save Our Now sounds like the climax to a superhero movie. Like this should be included in it. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but that's the way I personally feel. But everything from choirs to Annika van Giersbergen, being able to incorporate different kinds of vocals along with Devin, and of course the musicality on display from everyone in the band. It is a pop metal masterpiece. In a way, I'm glad this is kind of the last album that Devin does and is going to make it on this series, because this was a life-changing album for me. I have it hanging up on my wall in the vinyl form. I know that kind of will make a lot of people angry that I don't actually listen to album vinyl. I just love the album cover so much that I love having it in vinyl form. Sue me. But as a lot of life changes started happening to me from 2013 onwards, having this album in 2012 meant near and dear to me, and I'm surprised it's only number 3 on here, but as you'll see with the last 2 albums here, you understand why it's only number 3. Coming in at number 2 is Anathema with Weather Systems, easily my favorite Anathema album. And, well, actually I shouldn't say it's that easy, as there's so many great Anathema albums, and of course, I did my ranking video of it several months back. You should go check that out. But this particular album has the most tear-jerking moments behind it. It's got some of the most phenomenal playing you'll ever hear in this style. And the album is so filled with love loss and endless hope and life, death, and everything in between. It's an album that is kind of just making me tear up a little bit on the inside right now, and I'm gonna do my damnedest not to cry on camera, at least right now, as I have another album where I might actually be tearing up at number 1. But the first time I heard this album, I bawled my eyes out pretty much through the entire album, and when I listen to it now, it still brings up a lot of those feelings, and I still get very, very weepy-eyed when I listen to it. And if an album can do that for you, I think it's one of your favorite albums, because why would you have that kind of emotional attachment if you didn't enjoy it? But I also got to see Anathema do a headlining show for this tour. It was so fantastic to see that. Alcest was also a part of that as well, which I'm surprised hasn't made it on the list in this series so far, but hey, we'll see what happens for the rest of it. This is just fantastic work from start to finish, and if you want some really emotional progressive rock, this is the album for you. Of course, you need to check out the previous album, We're Here Because We're Here, and if you're okay with a little more industrial and dance kind of influence, at least on the second half of the album, you should check out Distant Satellites as well, the album after this one. But if you want the one smack dab in the middle that just has everything that you want, everything that you need, just like Vertical Horizon, check out Weather Systems. And coming in at number 1, not only my favorite album of 2012, but one of my favorite albums of all time, probably in the top 2 favorite albums of all time. It is Woods of Ypres, Woods 5, Grey Skies, and Electric Light. This album is the most soul-crushing album I've ever heard in my entire life. It is one of the saddest albums you'll ever hear if you decide to check it out. If you don't cry at the beginning, you will cry by the end. And if you don't have a soul. I don't know any other way to describe it other than that. David Gold put his heart and soul into this album, and unfortunately, a week and a half before the album was released in 2012, he was struck by a truck driver and was killed instantly after seeing his parents for the holidays. And especially considering what this album is about, which is death, loss, and accepting mortality, it doesn't get much sadder than that. Now, from what I've seen of speculation, which I had no idea about, apparently there was a big old thing going on that this was a suicide attempt that went through. Not true, as he did have many plans to continue on with Woods 5. Apparently Woods 6 was already in the works, and I remember vividly on social media that he might have joined November's Doom on drums. There was talks of that happening, but unfortunately life took him away. And again, when you listen to the lyrics of this album and realize that he died a week and a half before the release of the album, it just hits that much harder. It is so much creepier, it is so much darker, and it makes you think about your own mortality, because unfortunately, every single person checking out this video, every single person not checking out this video, is gonna pass on. There isn't one of us that's gonna survive and live in immortality. We are all gonna pass on one day. Some, unfortunately, by our own accord. Some of us just being able to live the longest life they possibly can. Some by accidents. Some by just the will of the world. And every single way, it will always be sad. It's never a good thing when it happens. It's always going to be sad. And this is the soundtrack to your mortality. I mean, of course, there's a couple songs about love loss on here as well. I mean, that's always going to be a Woods thing. But it's predominantly about the end of your life. And it's not for everybody. I'm not going to tell everyone to go check out this album, because this will rip your soul apart if you let it. And it ripped my soul apart, but I think it helped me ever since I checked it out all the way back in 2012. But for you, it might be too much, which I totally understand. And maybe one of the other 9 albums on this particular part of the list will be able to do something for you. But if you dare venture into something this dark, I hope you enjoy the ride, because I know I do, and it's become one of my favorite albums of all time, one of the most cathartic albums of all time, and just an album that has really changed the course of my life. And if you give it a shot, it might for you as well. Alright, now that I thoroughly depressed you with those last couple albums, let's call it a day here, and thank you very much for checking out my top 10 albums of 2012. What do you think? Do you like my list? Do you not like my list? Did you make any discoveries? Did I leave anything out? Or do you just want to hate on my own personal opinion? Let me know down below. And of course, like, comment, share, subscribe, all of that stuff to be able to keep in touch with Heavy Debriefings, keep up with brand new videos, and all of that stuff. And of course, share the word. I want to be able to reach as many people that are interested in this. So, subscribe, share with people. I want to keep this going. And I'm going to, but I want to be able to share it with as many people as I can. And until the top 10 albums of 2013, or another top 10 list, my next interview, review, or any other kind of video I put up here on the Heavy Debriefings YouTube channel, for Heavy Debriefings, this is Josh Runko saying, see ya.